see, but I've spent many years traveling to and thinking about and even living in the United Kingdom. In my 20 years working as a futurologist, one thing I found is that we humans are bad at future thinking. We have all these ideas and visions and scenarios and projections, and very often they turn out not to materialize, or they turn out to be wrong, and then something else takes us by surprise completely. This is why I'm going to spend my session today to change our perception about future, what it is and what we can do about it. Instead of thinking that the future is a place, a thing, the timeline, a certain date, something that we think if we just think and look hard enough, we'll be able to touch it, we should see future as an activity, something we can do, something we can and perhaps should do on a daily, weekly basis, whether it's in our private lives, when we're at work, or more importantly, when we are starting to think about tomorrow and the day after tomorrow. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a toolbox here in how we can future better as human beings. Let me start here. Look elsewhere. In the past decades, we humans have started to suffer from a new affliction that I call infobesity. Information has gone from being really scarce into being abundant, which means that these days most people believe themselves to be quite well informed, but very often their brains are full of rubbish, slander, gossip, sensationalism, conspiracy theories, and so on. Which is why the very basis to future better is to look elsewhere. If everybody is on social media, if everybody is reading a certain report or watching a certain TV program, there is tremendous value in looking elsewhere, into being a little bit more antisocial, into looking for secrets or hidden, as of yet unmade discoveries. So to cultivate your own unique information diet in a world of infobesity, that's the starting point for me and you to future better. Number 2, why do companies and individuals fail? Well, the most common reason is actually a little bit contrarian. Because we don't necessarily fail because we make mistakes. More often we fail because we do the same thing for too long. In the words of singer Nancy Sinatra, you keep saming when you ought to be changing. And we've seen this happen in many different companies that went bad. One of them is, of course, the Finnish mobile phone maker Nokia. And you know all about the part of the story where they were completely dominant, and everybody who is today above the age of 40 used to have a Nokia handset when they were growing up. Phenomenally successful company. And then they hear rumors about a Californian fruit company, and they ignore it, and they refuse to take Apple seriously. And then, of course, Apple, Samsung, and others ate Nokia's lunch. This part of the story you're probably familiar with. But Nokia's chairman, who rescued them from complete bankruptcy and brought them back from the darkness into a new direction where they started to do new things, he was asked, what did Nokia learn from this failure? What was the insight that we can all use? And what Risto Siilasmaa said was that we discovered that success is toxic. And it is. Success can make you lazy, it can make you arrogant, it can make you feel just entitled, and you start to subscribe to success. Pablo Picasso said that success is dangerous because all of a sudden you start to copy yourself. This is why the second way to future is to have a daily ritual where you and I wake up in the morning, we look in the mirror, and we say the words, you know what, I am a loser. Because if you feel and think that you're a loser, you become humble, open-minded, curious. A complete departure from the arrogance and the trap of success. And instead you start to look upon the world with new eyes, and you gain the perspective of the amateur. So that's the second way you need to start thinking about futuring better. The third one is that you need to have an open relationship with rules. You need to be promiscuous with rules. You actually need to cheat on rules. What do I mean by that? Well, instead of seeing rules as this firm wall that we can either break or not break, see rules as a kind of dancing partner for you to seduce and dance around and dance with. My son struggled tremendously in school. And as you know, as a parent, if you have a child who struggles in school, you are a little bit afraid of every phone call coming from the school. So one morning, I remember I saw the dreaded number. Oh my God, what is it this time? And then they said, you know, we actually have some good news for once. My God, I even wondered if they had the right number. Yeah, well, what is it? Well, your son is actually good at something. We've discovered a talent. Huh. Well, what? He's good at woodwork. And not only is he good at woodwork, he's the only student who follows the rules. What do you mean rules? You don't need rules. It's woodwork. It's creativity. Well, you see, we had to draw the line because all of the students wanted to build weapons, so we said no weapons. Well, what does my son make? Well, your son, he makes beautiful sailboats and ships, and he brought them home and he showed me, and I thought, wow, that's amazing. Beautiful sail ships, beautiful sailboats. And then one night when he'd gone to bed, I looked at the so-called sailing ships and I turned them upside down. And I realized that he'd been cheating on rules. He'd been listening, hearing it, and then finding a way with and around them as to not be detected. This is the story of invention and creativity in the world. John Walker was a pharmacist by day, and then he'd usually steal a few chemicals home, so at night he became a dabbling chemist. He usually probably mixed a bit of sherry, and he sat around mixing chemicals for the sheer sake of curiosity. And then one night he just fell asleep on his couch, probably from drinking too much sherry. When he woke up the next morning, he saw that some chemicals had solidified and crusted on the stirring rod, which was a rather expensive piece of equipment for him. So he panicked a little bit and tried to scrape it off. And as he scraped it off against the stone floor, we're talking here 19th century England, it caught fire. And John Walker is known today as the inventor of the match. But imagine if the same thing was to play out in the year 2020, and everybody would go, my God, thank God, the secret police caught him, and so on. Because today we cannot really fathom that most people are not driven by bad things and bad motifs. Which is sad, because had we arrested John Walker, a world-bettering invention would be left on the floor. We need to have respect for this idea of bending and dancing with, sleeping around on, and cheating on rules in order to future better. My fourth insight: seek creative friction. I started thinking of today's theme, the power of us, and I realized it could mean two different things. It could either mean us as in a sports team where we dress in the same clothes and we have the same goal and very often the same gender. But it can also mean Fleetwood Mac. And if you know a little bit about this 1970s pop group, you know that the more they hated each other, the better their music got. Critics and fans usually agree that their best album is Rumors. When they recorded Rumors, they couldn't stand each other's company. In other words, there's some kind of value not in agreement and harmony, but in tension, turmoil, and disagreement. That's what I call creative friction. Think about the famous movie line from Orson Welles' masterpiece, The Third Man. Italy under the Borgias had 30 years of terror, violence, and murder, but they produced Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, and the Renaissance. During the same time, Switzerland had decades of stability, democracy, and brotherly love. And what did they produce? The cuckoo's clock. That's what we mean by creative friction. People working together, bouncing ideas, thoughts off each other, creating something new that wasn't there before. And we live today in a world that has changed. We don't talk anymore about ideas. I, me, mine. Increasingly we talk of we-dias. More people working together to create something. This was beautifully phrased by the science writer Matt Ridley, who famously said, innovation happens when ideas have sex. Of course, if you want to know what the Power of Us conference is, now you know it's an ideas orgy. And more areas are influenced by more and more brains. The smartphone you have in your pocket today usually has something like 50,000 different patents inside of it, coming from dozens of different countries. It's like a Frankenstein's monster. Music, more and more people are needed to compose top 100 hits. We take Blinding Lights by The Weeknd, 5 songwriters. Break My Heart by Dua Lipa, 7. And Uptown Funk by Bruno Mars, 11 different people working together. Think about Nobel Prizes. We're not giving it to individual geniuses anymore. We're giving it to groups of people. Jennifer Doudna and Emmanuel Charpentier winning the Nobel Prize of Medicine this year for the invention of the CRISPR genetic scissors. Or the World Food Programme winning the Peace Prize. It's not an individual, it's an entire organization. Thousands of employees working across the world. This is the world of we-dias, where the power of us means harnessing creative friction in order to get new ideas done. Finally, of course, I read a year or so ago that if you want to stay married, you need to fight more. In the Journal of Marriage and Family, in a famous journal article from 20 years ago, they found that more than 60% of divorces happen in so-called low-conflict marriages. In other words, the cliche of throwing plates and fighting and arguing is not true. Most divorces happens in families where you're just silent, polite, not necessarily honest, just nodding and agreeing with each other. So, want to stay married? Fight more. Want to create better music, better products, or win a Nobel Prize? Fight, argue, disagree more with more people. Creative friction. Finally, you need to survive 3 sorrows. What I mean by this is that nothing lands as a complete success. Most often when you create something new, it could be a song, a work of art, a book, or a new company, people don't understand what it is and they don't see it, and you will fail for a little bit of time, perhaps, before you succeed. The best metaphor I could draw here is a butterfly. Right? Slack, the ubiquitous collaboration tool, began its life as a failed computer game tool. Or Twitter began its life as a failed podcast portal called Audio. Instagram began its life as a failed geotagging service called Bourbon. Very often we see how success starts with failure. Nespresso, the coffee capsules. The patent was filed in the 1970s. First product was sold in 1986. failing, losing money consecutively for 20 years. Then came George Clooney adverts, Nespresso success. Everybody had one at home. It's a success 30 years in the making. Or as somebody once said, it took me 30 years to become an overnight success. If you want to create something new, you have to be willing to be misunderstood for a very long time. It's only when people don't really understand what you mean, or they think you're aloof, strange, or even downright stupid, that you're probably on to the next thing that we'll all celebrate someday and the day after tomorrow. So here we go. 5 ways to future. Number 1, look elsewhere. Tailor make your own individual unique information diet. Number 2, be a loser, not a winner. See yourself as this humble, curious, open, green being, interested in growth, not of protecting the old. Number 3, cheat on rules. Be promiscuous. Nobody died saying, I'm glad I at least followed every single rule in life. That never happens. Seek creative friction. It's the people you slightly dislike or disagree with who can bring you forward. I'm reminded of Michelle Obama's beautiful quote, you should always run towards the noise, not away from it, because it's in the noise that new things are born, new directions, new politics, new ideas. And finally, find the courage and find the tenacity to survive 3 sorrows. Let me end with something I saw in Norway a few years ago. It was a Friday morning. It was a ballroom in a hotel. It was a management conference. But the organizers, instead of just putting chairs and tables in the room, had decided to remix things a little bit. So we saw a room full of Pilates balls. You know, the big rubber balls you find in a fitness club? And I remember all of these delegates came in and they crossed their arms and they went, what the hell is this? You know, what's going on? Some of them perhaps understood that a Pilates ball is good for posture, and they appreciated the fact that it was a new idea instead of the same old. But nobody really wanted to sit first on the Pilates balls. So we had easily 200 delegates, arms crossed, standing against the wall, and a bunch of empty Pilates balls in the middle. And then one person sat down. And you all know this person. The idiot. There is an idiot in every company and organization, and if you don't know who it is in yours, it's probably you. When the idiot sat down, nothing happens. People were like, what an idiot. Second person sat down, yet another idiot, nothing happened. It was when the third delegate sat that magic happened. I remember blinking. 20 people were sitting. I blinked again. 200. So we went from nobody, 1, 2, boom. And that taught me how the future begins. So, ladies and gentlemen and non-binary delegates at Tomorrow of Us conference, how the future begins, studied through the lens of how Norwegian delegates sit on Pilates balls in a conference a few years ago. Nobody was sitting. Nobody, boom, 1. Everyone was sitting. It's like ketchup out of the bottle. No ketchup, no ketchup, no ketchup. Ketchup all over the plate. And we see this curve everywhere now. The technology that was impossible is now everywhere. Corona is a beer. No, it's a virus. Billie Eilish, completely unknown. Now a global superstar. This curve also shows us how we age. You are young, you are young, you are young. Phew, you're old. And there was nothing in the middle. So take that to heart. Learn how to future. Seek out the power of us to create a future we will all want to live in. Thank you.